Hi, I'm Elizabeth Tasker, and today I want to talk about using virtual reality for outreach and online events. I'd like to start by busting three myths about virtual reality. The first is that you need a virtual reality headset to participate in virtual reality events. This is not true. All of the platforms I will introduce today are accessible from Windows and Mac desktop and laptop, and some even from a smartphone. Second myth is that if you do want a headset, and they are very cool, you would also need to purchase a high-end gaming PC. This is no longer true. I am currently on a standalone headset that doesn't require any extra computational power. This is the MetaQuest 2, and it's currently sold for roughly 630 Australian dollars. So it's approximately the same price as a gaming console. The third myth isn't really to do with VR, but it's the idea that online can never be as good as in person. And this is the myth I really want to bust today. I think online and virtual meetings can be as good, if not better, than in-person events. Now, this next point is actually really important, and I'm only going to brush up against it. It's the point that if you want to reach people, you have to go online. So this is a very simple example. These little telescopes represent planetariums in England. Now, when I was 9 years old, I went to the London Planetarium with my dad, and it was really inspirational, and it was a big factor in me choosing to go into astrophysics. But we were really lucky. Most people do not live near planetariums or big museums or any of the other locations where in-person events are frequently held. So if you want to reach them, you do have to go online, and this point has been doubly underscored recently by a paper that came out in Nature that compared diversity at online conferences versus those done in person. And it discovered that diversity in geographical location, in race, in gender, in sexual orientation, all increased significantly when you went online. So if you really want to reach people, we need to make online events the best they can possibly be. So why do I like virtual reality so much? Well, one of the principal reasons is that in virtual reality, you have an avatar like this, and this gives you a location in the virtual space. And with a location, you can have directional audio, meaning that I can tell whether you're close to me or further away from me, or what direction your voice is coming from. And this allows you to have a room full of people chatting and talking together in simultaneous overlapping conversations. And just like in person, you can organically move between the groups when you overhear something of interest. Another advantage of a virtual space is the ability to put objects in it. So you can have models that, for instance, represent instruments or spacecraft. And this is the point where virtual reality starts to go beyond in person, because you are most certainly not allowed to pick up and handle and touch spacecraft or delicate instruments. But there's absolutely no problem with doing that in virtual reality, which is fabulous for outreach, it's great for education, and it's a really good icebreaker that starts conversations if you're both looking at the same model. Going beyond models, we can also look at whole areas that you can design in virtual reality. And many of these are freely available that other people have already constructed. For instance, you can go and stand on Mars and examine the Perseverance rover, or you can maybe go and explore the Northern Lights. So these are the four platforms that I have previously had experience in using, and they are all free. You can download them on your headset or on a Windows or Mac computer. And with these, there are two particular events I'd like to discuss. One is a virtual visitor centre, and the other is an asteroid exploration talk I gave to high school students. So the first of these, the Virtual Visitor Centre, was put together by T-Form, the Future of Meetings group, which I'm part of, for an academic meeting on infrared astronomy. Now, at this academic meeting, the talks were held principally on Zoom, but we wanted a space where people could also interact and chat. And so we put together several of these rooms. Now, this was all off the shelf, meaning that the room design was already there, And all we had to do was select it and use it. We didn't have to do any modeling at all ourselves. You could set this room up tomorrow if you wanted, entirely for free. And in that room, we put models and videos and posters that were already freely available as part of the outreach for the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency. So we had a model of asteroid Ryugu, we had the spacecraft Hayabusa 2 that visited it, and we had videos and images from the mission and other missions by JAXA. And people could really come and experience these, they could handle the models, and they could also chat and interact with one another. For the asteroid exploration talk, we actually did get sets designed for us. They were designed by a company called Omniscope. And we had 3 sets designed, and we did the talk describing the Hayabusa 2 mission moving through these sets. So we started off in quite a traditional room, and then we moved to places that were definitely not traditional. One of these was the surface of asteroid Ryugu, which was based on real data from the Hayabusa 2 mission. And a second was a mythological place that doesn't really exist, and that is the underwater palace of Ryugu-jo. And this is from the folk tale of Urashima Taro, from which asteroid Ryugu takes its name. And by moving through these areas, we describe different aspects of the mission. So from these events, I would say I learned 6 things. The first is, never underestimate the time it gets people to get people started and logged into the system. While the software is free, it's easily downloaded, and it's not difficult to use, it does take people time to get around to that downloading, to create an account in some cases, and to enter the platform, and of course, to choose the perfect avatar. Secondly, I found the talks went more smoothly if you explain to people that this is somewhat experimental software and there might be glitches. It's a little bit like when we first switched from overheads to PowerPoint, and we always had connection issues with laptops. Of course, that sometimes still happens, but it's a lot less now than it was in the past. So one typical issue might be sound. Either you can't hear them or they can't hear you. And there's lots of different fixes for that. It's worth asking them to check their settings, because sometimes the program doesn't have permission to use their microphone. But there's also the old turn it off and turn it back on again, which works surprisingly often. One issue I had when I was talking to my high school students was that of questions. Because you can't see facial expressions very clearly through an avatar, you can't always tell when someone wants to ask a question. And this meant sometimes my group of students sort of went silent, not because they didn't have questions, but because they were anxious about interrupting one another. So one way around that is actually on this particular platform. I'm currently on AltSpace VR, and it allows you to use emojis. And the advantage of that is that one of these emojis is a giant hand, and I can raise that to say, hey, I'm about to ask a question, and give people some visual cues. Another point is that these sets are quite exciting, especially if you're on an asteroid or Mars, but even if you're in a normal lecture theatre. And it's worth giving people time to explore the space, so they're not trying to listen to you and also sort of take a squint over their shoulder about in their surrounding environment. And finally, virtual reality really comes into its own when people are interacting with one another. So if you just bring them into the environment and then they just listen to a talk, they might not necessarily realize that this is a big advantage over Zoom or YouTube. They might find it sort of novel but quite similar in experience. But it's really when you start to talk and interact with other people that VR comes into its own. So do leave time for that. There are also, this is developing software, and there are also lots of exciting things in the pipeline. Some platforms offer automatic translation. For example, you could give a talk in your language and then your audience could hear it in theirs. Another thing that's coming down the platform is full body tracking and also better mapping of facial expressions. So if you are intrigued about this, then do come and check out the talk series that's currently been organized by TFORM. And this is Science for the Public Good. And we have a series of lectures, roughly one a month, on this theme. And the speakers have been brilliant. But one of the purposes also is that this is held in a virtual reality platform, and it's a chance for people to try it out. So do check that out if you're interested. Thank you very much.